The thing is, the sequels should be my Star Wars. The Force Awakens came out when I was 13, and at that point I didn't know anything about the Star Wars universe. And when I saw The Force Awakens in theaters, I had literally just seen the 6 first films. So in a way, I was kind of in a perfect position to really love this new era of Star Wars and kind of grow up with it. And I have for quite some time already been wondering why that's not the case. And it's not that I was around people that hated the sequels, and the communities I was active in at that point were mostly positive about them. And I didn't hate them either, but they never captured my interest in the way that the other movies did, and I always found myself a lot more interested in everything that wasn't sequel related. So why is that? Obviously we have things like treatment of legacy characters and things that just don't make sense in universe, but for a brand new Star Wars fan, those things are not that big of a deal. Of course it plays a part, but honestly I'm tired of talking about it, so I will not. Instead, what we'll touch on in this video are things beyond the characters and the story, things that people don't mention that often but I think are extremely important. So first of all, the era itself. It's just not interesting. We've seen this before. It's basically the OT era all over again. If we look at all other eras, they are all distinct from each other while still all being very Star Wars. There are different sorts of factions in power or otherwise relevant to the story, and the position of the Jedi and Sith varies a lot from era to era. The sequel era could have been somewhat interesting with the clearly evil threat of the First Order against an established New Republic, but now let's get rid of the entire Republic so that we can get right back to that big bad Empire versus oh so poor and brave rebels. And also let's make sure that, again, there is only a very small amount of Force users, just to make sure that it's not even a little bit interesting. And actually one of the things that annoyed me the most with The Last Jedi, believe it or not, was that the Resistance started calling themselves the Rebellion again.
Godspeed, rebels.
Obviously that's not the biggest issue with the movie, it just proved that we're not even pretending anymore that this isn't just the OT all over again. Not only is the power balance and the factions same as in the OT, the visuals are too. And here I'm referring to mostly the designs of the vehicles and equipment and costumes. If we just look at the space battles, it's X-Wings against TIE Fighters. It's just a bit more polished and modern. And that takes us to the overall look of the sequel era. And to me, something is a bit off about it. And I can't exactly put my finger on it, but I think it has to do with the fact that it's basically just a modernized version of the look of the OT era. And then, The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker specifically have that typical modern blockbuster look when it comes to cinematography and colors. It just doesn't look unique in the way Star Wars should. It lacks the character and charm that other Star Wars media has. And it's not because these films were made in a modern era with modern equipment and tools, because if you look at Rogue One, it captures the visual look of Star Wars perfectly. And all the new designs fit right in. Obviously the advantage Rogue One has that it's set in the OT era, so it can rely on already existing and recognizable things. But we have other examples as well, such as The Mandalorian and even Book of Boba. And no, I don't mean the Vespas. Let's not talk about those. When we look at some of these new designs, they are unique and creative, but still very Star Wars. And another thing is the planets. These shows have managed to show us an amount of pretty interesting and diverse planets. We also get some cool looking new planets in the games, in Battlefront 2 and Fallen Order. Oh, and actually also Solust in Battlefront 2015, we can't forget about that one. And actually, Rogue One also shows us some new planets that are really unique. And I'm not going to say that we don't get a variety of pretty cool looking planets in the sequels too, but with the exceptions of Exegol and Crate, everything is very Earth-like. All of these biomes can be found on Earth. They aren't really showcasing any new or interesting ideas in the ways that these planets look. There is nothing exotic or interesting about them. And then we have the alien species. And this is one of the biggest things for me, and again it comes down to world building. First of all, alien characters are just creatures in the background, props basically. And my main gripe with this is that we don't see any classic Star Wars alien species, or just any pre-existing ones. We see Admiral Akbar, but other than that I can't think of any previously established aliens being in the background in any scene. There is a bunch of new ones, some look pretty cool, but a lot of them have a very similar look in the end. They're quite animal creature-ish. Just look at this. See what I mean? A lot of similar colors and that kind of frog-like look. Don't exactly know how to describe it, but they share a lot of similar features. And there's a lack of near-human species that we see a lot in the rest of Star Wars. And for me, this makes it just inherently impossible to see it as part of the rest of the Star Wars universe. It just does not feel like it's in the same universe. Like, where did all the well-established aliens go? Twi'leks? Weequays? Quarrens? Anybody? No? Or anything from the prequels? But of course you can't use the prequels because nobody likes the prequels, right? And that takes us to something that is personally for me a pretty big deal. And that is the rejection of the prequels and anything barely prequel related. The prequel era is my favorite one, and it has always been part of my Star Wars experience. And even though I love the OT as well, I've just always felt more drawn to the prequel era of Star Wars. And it's just sad that the sequels completely ignore that part of Star Wars. Of course, the Clone Wars was a long time ago when we get to the time period the sequels are set in, but just take a look at that one episode from the Book of Boba. It's all in the details, and tying all of these eras together in a way that makes sense is beautiful world building, which again is a huge part of what makes Star Wars so great. The sequels are just so heavy on OT nostalgia. And we could have a whole discussion about how that nostalgia element doesn't really work, but that's for another time. But it's pretty clear that The Force Awakens was designed to make people excited about it because of nostalgia for the OT. And in my opinion, The Force Awakens completely doomed the sequels from the start. It started it in such a bad way. There is nothing anyone could have done to save it. After that, it was a soft reboot. In the end, this video and the countless others made on these subjects won't change anything. And we just kind of have to accept that it is what it is. And I'm not angry about the sequels, and to be honest, I've never really been. I'm just disappointed, that's all. But I choose to use my energy and time on all the aspects about Star Wars that I do love, and I advise you do the same. Unless you like being upset and rant about things, then go for it, and I'm sure Star Wars can be a great outlet for that, like for real. I won't be talking about the sequels very often on this channel, but I am planning on doing more of these opinionated discussion video essay type videos, and in fact I've kind of already made one where I talk about what problem I have with the High Republic, and you can find it right there, so go and check that one out if you want to.